Welcome to the Soulish Podcast, and thank you for being here. My name is Whitney Apke, and I am your host. On the Soulish Podcast, we're talking all about the aha moments, the uncomfortable and painful lessons of life, how to deeply connect with ourselves and others, and the breakthroughs, big or small, that we experience in our body, soul, and spirit. We'll dive deep, and I'm so excited to share my experiences and thoughts, as well as bring on guests who are thought leaders and truth seekers. It's my desire to uplift, encourage, and inspire you in each episode. And I'm so honored to have Mike Ellis as a guest. Mike is the host of a Satisfied Mind podcast. We talk about lessons learned from a life of inquiry. I hope you enjoy our conversation. So I am so happy to have you on as a guest on the Soulish podcast. I love your podcast. I can't get enough of it. I just think it's so cool to have so many different unique conversations. I'm going to try to pull it up so I can. There was just a couple of things, but even just your bio, I love, because it's a Satisfied Mind is the name of the podcast, and then lessons learned from a life of inquiry. And I just love that, because that's so what the journey is of life is inquiry. But I feel like, at least in my own life, sometimes you don't want to inquire and you just want to exist, but totally. It could also be wanting to be closed off and closed-minded. Like I grew up in Christianity. And so for me, it's the religion, and the organized religion, and having, whatever the congregation is around you to support those beliefs, and actually having no tolerance to inquire outside of that box. So for me, it's been kind of a personal journey. So that just stuck out to me. And I just thought that was so cool, because it's very much what the Soulish podcast is about, is inquiring and searching and wanting to know more, wanting to dive deeper. And so I love that. So that was the main reason why I just was like, this guy, we got to get him on the Soulish podcast.
Oh, well, it's really interesting how, how we come to find each other, and the internet, social media, podcasts and stuff it's just such a great way to connect, because you can go, you can share whatever it is that you want to share directly to whoever, resonates with that. And likewise, it's a bit like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes, but when you do stumble across, someone who kind of shares content that you resonate with, then it's a really cool thing. And likewise, I love having these conversations, and for me, the conversations, whether they're with someone, as a, interviewing a guest, or whether they're as a guest with you, for example, that's awesome. And then there's also, I feel like just the episodes that I create by myself are a conversation with myself, and the fact that some, people listen is great as well. So, it's a really cool way for me, at least, just to process, a lot of what's going on.
Because there's a lot right now going on with the pandemic.
There's a lot going on.
Especially today.
Yeah. Oh. It's insane. It's really hard to process it all. I was just watching the news just now, and it's like, I don't even know whether that's, I want to be informed, but what do you do? There's only so much you can take in before you just concede that there's a limit to what you can process, and there's a limit that where it becomes unhealthy as well. So it's tricky times, that's for sure.
I think Prince actually said, funny enough, that he actually has a quote saying that we are not meant to know everything that's happening in the world, and that it's actually overwhelming, and it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, energetically. It's so overwhelming and overstimulating. And then even like I just got pinged about the news right now going on with the Capitol. And I immediately, I was self-aware enough to realize that I immediately felt anxiety, even though I'm literally, you and I, because you're north of San Francisco, we both are literally on the other end of the country. And yet I feel as though it's knocking on my door. And so I just realized I'm having a physical response. I'm even fleshed, and warm. And I just realized, okay, we're not going to look at that. We're actually going to relax and get into the zone for the podcast. And, but I had to like tell
likewise,
myself.
I think we're both in a similar situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone is, right?
Yeah, that's everybody. Yeah. But just to be aware that, like, even though we're super connected, and that is really cool, like we were just talking about, that it's still, there has to be a balance, because we're not meant to know everything and be overwhelmed constantly by all the news going on in the world. It just actually isn't good. It can create anxiety, and I don't need any more. The world doesn't need any more.
I think we got enough.
There's enough. Yeah. So I just think that's really interesting, because even though it's like a double-edged sword, it's like, it's super positive to be so connected, and then it can actually cause issues.
Totally.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thoughts on that, man. I, become really aware of the inputs that I have, and trying to curate those more, and just aware of the impact that those inputs have. For me, it's been about trying to identify what's internally as well as externally, what's true and what's not, and what's true for me, and what's not healthy or helpful for me. And so, yeah, it's really hard. And I've only been in the States for the last few weeks, and I was, even prior to coming here, I had to be really selective of what it is that I read and watched, because if I read and watched everything that was being produced on the news, I wouldn't be here, because it just sounded like it. The world was coming to an end, and this is how it was going down. And so, just curating that input feed is really important, because it's just too bloody hard. And as you said before, it's overwhelming, and we're not designed to process it all. Where our brains can take it in, but our bodies can't process it. Our nervous system can't actually literally process it all, and so it just goes into overwhelm, or it goes into fight or freeze or flight kind of mode, just to regulate and to regain some sense of control, because otherwise it's too much, and we can't control, we can't react and respond to that in a way that is our bodies are designed to respond to things. And so we've just got to be really conscious of what it is that we consume. And then what stories are going on in our heads too. I think that's the internal curation that's really important as well. That's really kind of present for me at the moment. What stories am I telling myself, and how's that translating to my experience? So it's definitely a time for us all to be aware of that.
And present. I think that was one thing that for 2021, I just wanted to be really present with myself, because I felt like I was so present with what was happening in the world, within, my own community and my family and friends, and even friends in other states that I went to college with, that I'm like, gosh, I know that they're dealing with that right there. And feeling that like, and so I just realized, that's okay. It's okay to care. But I just realized I was allowing things to go on in my system and in my body and in my spirit that was a fear response or an anxious response, and not coming from a place of peace and calm and trust, that either God or the universe or source is taking care of it, and that there is a balance that has to happen eventually. I mean, I personally believe that, yin and yang kind of sort of, that eventually, like our bodies, we intake food, whether it's good for us or not. Our body has to detox in order to have some balance. And sometimes we give it a harder time than others. But I just feel like that's kind of nature. Nature kind of does that. It always balances itself out. So I just realized I need to consciously do that this year.
Yep. Nature will balance. I mean, we will balance out one way or another eventually. And the more conscious and intentional we are on that balance, perhaps the less difficult it might be. But that's really bloody hard. It's really bloody hard to be present to your experience. And that's my current experience at the moment. You know, I'm away from the things that I would normally have as default kind of distractors or detractors from, you know, some of the challenges that I'm experiencing and some of the fears that I'm facing. So it does feel like a real detox at the moment, a bit of a boot camp. And it's so much easier said than done to be present and kind and compassionate and gentle with yourself when fears are raging, because there's nowhere for them to hide. You know, there's nowhere to hide anymore. And so, you know, that's an interesting challenge to be present to it all. And that's something I can relate to at the moment, that's for sure.
Hey, it's me, Whit. Did you know that I'm a certified life coach? I have been coaching and mentoring people for over a decade now, and I specialize with issues of the soul and focus on inner freedom and manifestation. I can help you realign with your values and purpose, break free from emotional blockages and negative thought patterns, and you will feel motivated and encouraged to take the necessary steps to live a fulfilling life. We all need support and someone to cheer us on or hear us out, and it would be a privilege to be a part of your journey. My sessions are designed so that you're free to address whatever you feel is most important. If you are interested, go to whitneyapke.com/coaching and sign up for a free 30-minute call. I can't wait to work with you.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
No, you're not. You're not. And that's the thing. Everybody's doing it, right?
Right.
One way or another. Yeah. And if they're not, they will. And if they don't want to, it's going to happen anyway. It's just a case of how, you know, willing we are to embrace the process. And that's something we have to learn. I don't think that's innate, you know. And, you know, I was reading a great book, just finished it today. Actually, it's called The School of Life by Alain de Botton. And he's an English philosopher. And he wrote, you know, he started a movement called the School of Life, and they've got venues and shops, you know, throughout Europe, I believe, and there's a couple in Australia. Anyway, this book, it's the subtitle is, I think, from memory, it's an emotional education. And so he talks about the fact that we aren't taught how to process, regulate, understand, transmute emotions. We aren't taught that. It happens by default. And there's this great sort of, you know, analogy that he said. Imagine, you know, if school didn't end when you're 16 or 17, and school was something you went to go to classes. You went and attended classes that dealt with issues, for example. And one of the examples he used was like having a tantrum. And in that class, you'd have 5-year-olds and 75-year-olds learning together at the same time about how to process these emotions, because it doesn't end. You know, this doesn't, the education doesn't end because we know we don't stop growing, and we can sort of stall that process, but we're always going to be faced with challenges. And so, you know, that idea of an emotional education was just really interesting to me, and how this doesn't happen naturally in really well-adjusted families, communities, cultures, societies. There is a focus and intention on growth and evolution and milestones and you know, initiation through different rites of passage, where, you know, women learn how to be, you know, women, and men learn how to be men, and different roles are, you know, kind of part of that process. And people have got roles within, and, you know, they've got places where they belong. But I feel like there's so many of those structures and those systems are changing. And, you know, I don't think there's much that's being sort of, that we're replacing them with. And so a lot of those systems need to change. It's essential that they are changing. But I don't feel like we're replacing them with much that fills that kind of need for us to learn about ourselves and how to be, you know, constructive contributors to our community and the planet, you know. So this idea of like a school and school for emotional intelligence and awareness that you are always enrolled in is really cool. I reckon
That is really cool.
That's what we could all benefit a great deal from, I think.
I agree. And I always, whenever I see a toddler have a tantrum, I just always get a little jealous, you know, like I wish I could do that because I feel the same. I feel overwhelmed with all the things.
I was thinking about that literally half an hour ago, and we do have tantrums, but it just looks different. Mm-hmm. As a 3-year-old, you don't have the awareness of yourself and others and the impact of what you do on others, mm-hmm. because everything is very self-referential as a toddler. But we still have a very similar emotional reaction to things, yeah. and we do have tantrums. It just doesn't look like a kid on the supermarket, kind of floor, just flailing with arms and legs, right? And I agree. I wish I could do that.
I wish.
but there are ways in which we can express those mm-hmm. frustrations and those emotions constructively. And again, unless we learn how to do that, they don't get expressed and they stay within and they fester and they'll kind of bubble over at some point. And if we're not conscious of how best to process and share or express those emotions in a way that's safe for ourselves and for others, then it becomes destructive to ourselves mm-hmm. and to others. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that's, again, it's just about understanding, what we do and how we do it and why we do it and how we might be able to do it better. Because mm-hmm. if we don't, we see these frustrations and these tantrums boiling over, and the implications of that when adults, have tantrums, it mm-hmm. is a lot more serious and potentially destructive than it is when you're a 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. So, so it's it's definitely something that we could all practice how to tantrum better.
So my version of getting through my emotions is like hopping into the shower and crying my guts out. What does mm-hmm. it look like for you? Like, what's one way that you process emotions? And
I'm gonna be completely honest with you, that's pretty much how I spent a little while, just about an hour ago. I was feeling a lot of, like today, I had a lot of frustration, a lot of anger come up. And mm-hmm. I'm like, well, this isn't good. And I started, I was projecting it outwards, and it just wasn't healthy. So I went for a run. That's one of my tools. Good. That's one of my tools to just move emotion, move energy. Mm-hmm. So I went for a run up a hill, and was, reminded of how unfit I am. So I went for a run, and then I came back and I'm like, okay, there's still a lot of emotion and still a lot of energy here. And a lot of that was kind of physical energy that kind of was expressed, but then there's a lot of emotional energy. So I jumped in the shower and I stayed in there for a lot longer than I normally would. And I was just sitting under the water. I was just sitting on the floor in the shower, just going, just asking, I just really feel like I need to process some stuff here. And I was just asking for some guidance and asking for some help and asking for some insights. And at that time, I started to think about what it is that I needed and what it is that I might communicate to my partner about what it is that I need. And then I thought, that's not for anybody else to provide for me. Those needs are mine, and I need to take responsibility for those. And then I thought, but hang on, how do I do that? And I started to, whilst I was sitting under the shower, I think about, well, if again, coming back to that tantrum, or that 5-year-old, what does he need that I could provide? And I started to have a dialogue with myself about what those needs are and how I might, as an adult who's has a different perspective than a 5-year-old kind of emotional self would, what might that conversation between those two, really, legitimate kind of aspects of myself and very real experiences that I'm having at the moment, what might that conversation look like? And so that was kind of how I played it out this afternoon, and I think for me, water is a real conduit and a real catalyst for a lot of that it's a sensory thing. I feel like when I'm in the water, whether it be in the shower or in the ocean or in a pool, it kind of regulates a lot of my physical kind of like my body and emotions as well. Kind of just provides a little bit of a distraction to what's going on in the mind. And so showers are great places for ideas,
yes,
and
totally.
just kind of breaking that that sort of default thinking. When I'm in a good place, I get some great ideas in there. And when I'm struggling a little bit, I find it to be quite a calming, nurturing space. So I reckon
that's awesome.
Running water, oceans, pools.
There's something about it. Even more than that, I just think there's like a spiritual element to water that I just have yet to like wrap my mind around, because there is something cleansing about it, or renewing about it. It is a spiritual experience sometimes, and so that's cool that works for you as well.
I think we have an emotional memory. I think we have a memory of what it felt like to be in utero, just surrounded by just to be surrounded by, this really, by this fluid that just sustained us, and I think there's no coincidence that a lot of religious traditions in, baptizing, for example, involve, water or dunking and the ocean, it's just testament. I guess the way in which it moves kind of reminds me that I move and my emotions move as well. And standing under a waterfall or a shower or outside in the rain, it has a very cleansing property to it, literally as well as, kind of figuratively. And I think there's a memory that our body has of what that feels like to be immersed. Yeah. That's nurturing.
To be held, because really when you float in a pool, it feels like, you're being held by something, in a sense. So yeah, to be held and to hold space for ourselves in the same way that feels that way, of being secure and safe and supported. So that's really cool. That's a great picture.
Totally.
I wanted to ask you, just to switch gears here a little bit. I absolutely love your good morning questions.
Thank you.
I love that. Where did that idea come from, or that inspiration?
It came from a number of sort of sources. At the time, I've always been inspired by good questions. And I was a teacher for a long time and then worked as a coach and worked in companies, working with leaders and essentially in learning and development roles. And what I sort of realized is that people don't need to be told the answer, because it's the answer is not the point. The answer for pretty much any question you have, you can find in terms of information, but it's the process in coming to that answer yourself, particularly when it's questions related to your self, not logical kind of factual worldly questions, but when it comes to questions about yourself and why you do what you do, questions about human behavior, particularly when it's your own. I think we seek answers, but what we really need is the process of finding that answer for ourselves, not being told what the answer is. And so there's just been a couple of incredible questions that have always just kind of floored me and just kind of helped me to go, oh, fuck, okay, and expanded my perception of what the answer might be. And so I've always loved using those questions. And then, I have a sort of ritual in the morning whereby I'll go through, breathwork process and some meditation, and then I'll just sit and ask a question. I'll either sit and ask a question or I'll sit and wait for a question to come to me. And that might be my focus for the day, just to help guide me throughout the day as a bit of a beacon for, how I might direct my thinking throughout the day. And I just, that was something that I was doing. And then I'm like, I love it when, I love those card decks of questions, that you sit with your friends or partners or whatever, just kind of ask, and you just learn so much about yourself and each other through those questions. Yeah. So questions, I think, just have the power to really, expand our own understanding and also expand our awareness of others. And it's just a very expansive process to ask a question and then explore the answer and not go straight to what you think the answer is. And there's been some great people, great coaches who have done this really well. And I've been inspired by the questions that they ask and how they go about, helping me and others to come to an understanding that is new, not one that is, somebody else has provided. So the power of questions has been really, really awesome. And so I would do this as part of my morning routine. And then I'm like, with the podcast, it became, I was doing interviews with people and, they took a while to schedule and they took a while to, to record. And I just felt like, as much as I love that and love listening to, long form podcasts, I was also listening to a lot of just short questions or short podcasts at the start of the day or during the day on a walk, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that kind of stimulated some thinking for me. And I thought, well, maybe I might start sharing some of the questions that I love to ask and to see how that goes. And just because they were questions I was asking myself, and it was nothing for me just to record those and put them out there. And that's kind of really how it began. And like anything, I think if you do, the reason I was doing it is because it was of value for me, and I thought it might be of value for others. Probably quite a selfish reason in the first instance. But I think it's they're the kind of questions I would like to listen to if I was unsure about how to frame my day, or I was looking for something to do, or a different way of kind of thinking. Good questions can really be a catalyst for a different way of thinking and potentially, hopefully some new understandings and some new learnings that you come to by yourself, and that's really empowering. And so, it's really cool. I've been, just on the lookout, for good questions, and there's so many of them out there. And so I enjoy asking them, and I enjoy the process of answering them for myself as well. And so, it's just been a lot of fun.
Did you have any questions come in for your morning meditation this morning, or anything in particular?
No, it's good. That's a good question. Thanks for asking. No, the question, the same statements has been present the last couple of days for me, and that's just to be witness to the lesson in the moment. At this time of year, the last week, couple of weeks, I've been really focused on how I want this, what I want to do this year, and what I want to experience this year, and what intentions I have for the year, and how it might play out. And it just hasn't been working. That I've been really frustrated because I'm not getting any clarity or any momentum, and it's just feeling really clunky. And it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe this isn't a time for me to be thinking about how I want this next year or this year to end. Maybe there's the lesson that I'm needing to learn is right in front of me if I was only just present enough to witness it. And so the messages the last couple of days have really been about just be witness to the lesson in the moment. And then that's really frustrating because I'm like, what the fuck is it? What is it? How do what do I do? Tell me, and I jump straight to the answer. Like, well, can you just tell me so I can get on and do with it? Then I can get on to do an experience and have all the things that I, designed. It's like, no, that's not how it works. So that's just a constant, it has been just a reminder to come back to the present, and the answers are all there. And to be honest, that's where a lot of the frustrations come as a result, because I'm like, oh, this is harder than I thought, and isn't it ironic? Isn't it really interesting how the hardest, for me at least, I don't know if you can relate, I'm sure you can.
Totally.
One way or another, the hardest thing to do is just to let go and trust and do nothing. And I hang on, like I just white knuckle, like I would not let that go. I would not let go. I'm getting better at it. But I'm just, that's what I'm conscious of at the moment. So the guidance from wherever that comes from is just being just to be present to the moment. Don't distract. Don't deflect. Just sit in it. And and I'm like so uncomfortable doing that.
It's true though, because like I actually posted this on the Soulish podcast this week, that my lesson from 2020 was to, instead of holding on and just trying to force it into place, to actually let go and let be. And the second I actually click into peace with that is when the answer comes, or the opportunity, or the next door opens, whatever it is. I meet somebody that puts me into, know with somebody else, it connects me, right? It could be anything. And it's like, God, why was that so hard? Like, I fought to the nail for that answer. And then the second I let go of it, all of it falls into place, and it doesn't mean that you don't respond or you don't have to work or step forward, right? But that was what I was looking for like an entire year, if not years. And then the second I let go, but like something clicked in me. It wasn't just like, give it up, right? It was like a conscious effort, like you're saying, to like literally come from a place of frustration, tension, anger, resentment, irritation, to a place of total stillness and peace and honestly trust.
At the beginning of every year, as an offering of gratitude to the universe for all that I have been blessed with, I donate to a charitable organization that's mission aligns with mine. And this year, I am donating to No Kid Goes Hungry. In 2018, over 38 million Americans lived in poverty, and an estimated 15 million of those were children. According to the USDA, before the coronavirus pandemic, more than 11 million children in the United States live in food insecure homes, which means that those households don't have enough food for every family member. Today, projections show that 18 million children could face hunger this year. If this also resonates with you, join me this year in donating to No Kid Goes Hungry. The link is in the show notes for your convenience, or go to nokidhungry.org.
There's a few things that really come to mind when you share that, and thanks for sharing that. The first one, which is the last thing you just said, is we don't get to choose the lessons that we want to learn, right? I kind of wish that I'd learned the lessons I learned in 2020. I'm not going to have to, kind of double down on again, but the chances are that that's exactly what's going to happen. Fuck.
In a new form,
okay.
Or at another level. Yeah.
Yep. The other thing too is that no matter how many times we do this, as in feel frustrated, anxious, whatever it is, and then let go, and then experience the relief that comes from that, no matter how many times we do that, and no matter how cognizant of the fact that it always happens, you always get the relief, it's always better, you always are in a better place for having done it. No matter how many times you do that, no matter how much we know that to be true, it's still really fucking hard every single time. It's really hard. And it's like, why? Done this before. I know how it works. I know the outcome. What's your resistance now? It doesn't seem to get any easier. Although we can, it's a skill that we can practice. But it's interesting how it always feels like you're doing it for the first time. The circumstances are different. The process is pretty much the same. The outcome is pretty much the same. It's always the same. Always feel better. But it's interesting. And the other thing too is that I feel like it's not just a moment of letting go. It's a lot of things that we do leading up to it that put us in a place where we can do that. And that self-care routine, or that self-care rituals, or when I say self-care, I'm not talking about like lying in the bath with rose petals and music and candles. No, it's like, what are the fundamentals for mental and physical health that you need to maintain? Because if I'm not doing those, pretty much I can guarantee within a few days I'm going to start to feel out of alignment. And if I am doing them, then I'm just in a better place. Exercise is one of those things. So I had to go for a run this afternoon because I'm just been inside most of the day for the last few days, and I'm like getting antsy, and I know it's not healthy. So there's a lot of things that we can do that will help make that choice. to lean in, to let go, just that little bit, seem a little bit less traumatic than it might otherwise.
I love it. Yeah, it's so true. Oh, it's so hard. Some things in life are just, it's hard because as an adult, you can't pull a 5-year-old tantrum, but you can sometimes feel very much that way. And I don't know about you, but there's sometimes I long for that innocence of not having to stress about like world stuff that's happening or in the country, or sometimes I wish that I could go back to being a kid again. And usually that's just finding your inner child and choosing to guard yourself like you were guarded, as a kid. And choosing to just, in that sense, it's discipline, yes, but it's loving yourself, of I'm going to choose how much I input, like you said earlier, how much I output as well, and managing that balance, but being present with yourself and loving yourself. And that could be the discipline of a routine of exercise and, eating right and all of that, but having your rituals too of meditation or prayer, whatever feels right, or whatever is within your practice, your belief system, whatever that is. But it's a matter of just making sure that you're present with yourself and holding space, right? But I always picture it like that. Like I'm mothering myself. I'm loving myself like my mom did, like my dad did, and setting up those guards, right?
I love that. I really think that's such an important approach, and a responsible one, and a healthy one, and an adult one, a grown-up one, and one that we all can do, and we all should. And I don't like to use that word, but I think, for me, I would, my default would be to outsource the things that I need and have somebody else meet those needs for me, and then get pissed off with them that they don't. That's not fair. That's not responsible. That's not how anybody should relate to others, whether that be in a relationship or family or friendship or whatever. But to take the responsibility of meeting, your own needs as much as you can. There's always a need for community and connection with others, but fundamentally, what it is that you need. And if you don't, it's your responsibility to connect with that and find out and ask yourself what it is, and do whatever you can, to meet that needs. And I love that what you said about just guarding yourself, or protecting yourself, or nurturing yourself, or forgiving yourself, or whatever that it is you need. Like, that's such a powerful thing to do. Something else I love about this conversation is that we're just, I guess it's the state of the world at the moment, or at least the place where we're in, the country we're in, this time we're in, is that it's really important just to acknowledge that sometimes it's really bloody hard, and it's not. And particularly this time of year as well, the distance or the disconnect between expectations and reality is really contrasted. And so just to acknowledge where we are, and for that to be okay, and to just do whatever is necessary at this time. And that might be to run a long bath, or to sit on the couch, or to not do anything, or to just leave your to-do list for the day, or to, just not place the pressure on yourself to do that which you think you should be doing, and do that which it is that you need, and have the self-awareness to do that. I think that's the kind of relief that we all need. Well, so many of us have need at this point in time, at least. And that's really powerful.
Vulnerability is coming up for me right now in my mind as we're talking of like, I'm just realizing that as I've been coming more and more to this place that you're talking about, of finding that peace, loving myself, being present with myself, I'm realizing that I'm also giving myself permission to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable with people, whether that's on the podcast or the people that I coach, like my clients, or just, people in general. But I'm realizing that it's giving me permission to be vulnerable with the fact that I don't have my shit together all the time. Like, I'm a human, and I'm dealing with stuff and processing things just like everybody else, and it's not perfect. I don't meditate every day, sometimes it just doesn't happen. It's like, so you want to be, as a leader or someone that's trying to build a community, you can feel that pressure of like, I have to have my shit together all the time and I have to have really profound things to say. But it's like, no, actually being vulnerable, and that vulnerability is all you need to be, is just being true to yourself and honest. And that's all you need,
Well, it's interesting. I think there's a few things there that are true universally, fundamentally. And one is that nobody's got their shit together. Nobody ever has.
But
always.
We want to.
We want to because we think others do, and we think there's something wrong with us because we don't. It's just not. It's just never has been and never will be the human condition that somebody does most of the time, let alone all the time. So that's true. The other thing that's also true is vulnerability is not a choice. It's a constant state which we experience. It's how comfortable or how courageous we are in acknowledging that and sharing that. That's the difference between some and others. It's everybody's vulnerable. We just are. It's just whether we're willing to acknowledge that. And I think that in doing so, there's a relatability that helps connect people, which is really important at this time too, because like we're all kind of going, what the fuck is going on? Is it just me, or am I feeling really, am I just all over the shop? Am I the only one kind of sucking life right now? You look around and the truth is, no, you're not. Everyone is, to varying degrees, and within their own kind of frame of reference to what is, what is healthy for them as well. But it's got, when you start comparing yourself to others, then it becomes really complicated and convoluted. But that experience of vulnerability, I think everybody is having. And then there are people who are courageous enough to acknowledge that and share that, which I think really helps to define the kind of leadership that we need now and into the future, is people who acknowledge how things actually are, and what we're going to do about that together. I think vulnerability is a huge part of a huge essential skill for leaders at this time. And it's the definition. Vulnerability is synonymous with courage. And oh man, that's the kind of, I feel like a relief when I'm talking with somebody who's able to acknowledge their vulnerabilities as well, because you kind of feel like, oh, it's not just me. We learn so much about ourselves through others sharing their vulnerability, and I think that is a fast track to building connection and relating to others at a time when we need that, time when we need that more than any other time, I reckon.
No, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and for sharing.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me, and I love what you're doing. I love your approach to the podcast and the kind of conversations that you're having, just acknowledging it all. And these are really important conversations to have. So thank you for the opportunity to be involved in this. Oh yeah,
you're officially a part of the Soulish community.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. The Soulish Podcast is not only a podcast, but a community where we can relate to each other and support each other in our soul journeys. Join the community on Instagram and Facebook at I Am Soulish. And if you resonated with Mike and what he shared, go check out his podcast, A Satisfied Mind. The link is in the show notes for this episode. You'll find all kinds of inspiring conversations and his good morning questions, which are my new favorite addition to my time of reflection and contemplation. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.